Now on to our featured speaker, SMA's Admiral Chuck Goddard. There's Chuck with his hat. Excellent. Now, Chuck comes to SMA with 30 years of ship systems engineering and program management experience as a naval officer. During his time with the Navy, he worked on various complex ship programs, culminating in his role as the Navy Program Executive Officer Ships, which is a very esteemed position in the Navy. And is Jacques back yet? I think he's still having bandwidth problems. So Chuck graduated from the US Naval Academy and received a master's in naval architecture and marine engineering from MIT. He received a prestigious award, the Gold Medal for Exceptional Technical and Program Leadership from the American Society of Naval Engineers. Now, if you have questions for Chuck, just type them into the chat and we'll try to get to them after Chuck's talk. Let's go ahead and move on to Chuck. Welcome, Chuck.
Well, ahoy, mates. For the next 20 minutes, I'm happy to be your skipper as we tour our nation's great shipbuilders. Go ahead and share my slides and get started. All right, a little bit of an overview to get started with. MARAD, better known as the Maritime Administration, puts out a report every several years on the economic importance of the U.S. private shipyards and why they're called private. These are the ones that are privately owned. There are 4 public naval shipyards that we will talk about at some length next week that are not included in this report. So there's currently 154 shipyards in our country that are spread across 29 states that are active shipbuilders. And these are separated and distinguished from the 300 yards that are engaged in ship repair and maintenance, but not actually engaged in the building of ships. As you can imagine, the federal government's a very important source of demand for shipbuilders. Since we stopped the subsidies in the 80s, we have not built any ships for foreign entities of any size. The only big ships that are built here, ones that are built under the Jones Act, which is under cabotage, which means that they have to, any ship that goes from one US port to another has to be US flagged and built here. So then the majority of the large vessels, as you can see, are actually then delivered to the United States government. So 14 out of the 15 large draft vessels that were delivered in 2020 were delivered to the US Navy or the Coast Guard. And you can see here that there were 7 each of those. Then a little bit about the overall economic impact. In 2019, they had a direct impact of about 12 billion. This is in direct salaries to the shipyard workers. But you can see there's this multiplier of about 3 to 4. And so it's almost 40 billion when you include all the suppliers, so the people that provide pumps and gas turbines and other engines for the ships. And also if you include the economic impacts of the spending. And so this is for restaurants and for hotels and those kinds of things that are in the area. So you can see this is a large part of our GDP. In terms of employment, there's 107,000 direct jobs. Again, these are ones that actually work in the shipyards. And with a total impact then of almost 400,000 jobs in our nation are associated with shipbuilding. Not surprising, the largest state is Virginia by 2-fold, over 70,000. And that's because of the big shipbuilders that are there that we'll cover. And then also, obviously, the Navy's major port on the East Coast is in Norfolk, and all of the ship repairs associated with that. But California is second largest. Again, the Navy's main port down in San Diego and the repair work there, as well as the new construction that occurs. And then Connecticut, not surprising because of the submarine work. And then you can see how the rest of them play out there. So we're going to do this in a 2-part series. Today, we'll talk about the shipbuilders. We'll go over a little bit of their history. A lot of these have been around for a while. What their current capabilities are, what their projects are, what SMA's involvement has been in those, and then highlight any issues that are associated with them. We obviously can't cover 150 shipyards that are in new construction, but we will focus on the big 7 as identified by the Navy. So these are the ones that principally serve the US Navies and ones that I'm very familiar with and haven't been PEO ships. I've been in those yards. The first is starting up on the East Coast, up in Maine on the Kennebec River is Bath Iron Works. Bath is a subsidiary of General Dynamics. It's focused on building surface warships. It was founded back in 1884, and it has built private, commercial, and military vessels. But really, since the war, World War II, it's been largely just military vessels and mostly service combatants and destroyers for the US Navy. During the war, Bass ships were considered to be superior toughness by the sailors. And it rose to the phrase that Bath built is best built. And Bass continues to use that mantra today. And believe it or not, you could walk on a DDG-51, which are built here and also in another shipyard we're going to cover, Huntington Ingalls. And you can tell right away that it's a Bath-built ship by the quality of the ship. There is a distinction. And then today, sailors still love to serve on their Bath ships. Interesting factoid that despite losing the DDX competition to Huntington Ingalls, they eventually built all three of the DDG 1000s that were built in a swap where some ships went down south for them to build. The employment is 5,000. Bath Iron Works is the largest employer in the state of Maine. It's about 60 acres there on the river. And she has a floating dry dock that can lift up to 80,000 tons. Her current projects are DDG 51s, which she'll continue to build through this decade under multi-year contracts. She's working on the replacement ship, which is the DDG-X in the preliminary design phase. And we've supported them in the past on the Arsenal ship, which was the precursor to DDX. But they historically have handled most of their strategy and proposals internally. We're hoping to see that might change here. They've had new leadership in the yard, and for the first time in many years, they haven't had somebody that grew up within the shipyard. They actually had a VP come over from Gulfstream to try to shake things up a little bit there. They've been struggling recently, particularly with their relationship with their labor union. So their big challenge coming up is just to see how they can win the DDG-X competition and be the lead shipbuilder. But they haven't really won anything since DDG 51. So hopefully they'll reach out to us and we'll be able to give them a little bit of helping hand. Next on the GD agenda is electric boat. So moving down the coast to Connecticut on the Thames River, not the Thames, in Groton, Connecticut, which is across from New London, Connecticut, is electric boat. An electric boat for over 100 years now has been the primary designer and builder of submarines for the United States Navy. Interestingly, Electric Boat was reorganized as General Dynamics Corporation in 1952. And then as GD grew, Electric Boat actually then became a subsidiary within the Marine Systems segment, but they were the original General Dynamics Corporation. Here you see the shipyard that's in Groton, which employs about 14,000 people. It has about 118 acres and 2 graving docks. Graving docks are those large docks that have caissons that then the water's pumped out of, but they're literally are built into the side of either a river or a bay. Excuse me. They build modules up in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and they float them both down to Groton, Connecticut, and they also float some of those down to Newport News, where the submarines are then assembled. Essentially, they link those sausages together, the rings, to make the submarines. They're currently building Virginia-class SSNs under multi-year contract. And the Columbia-class, which is the replacement for the ballistic missile submarines, have just started building the first 2 of those. And again, those will be built both at Electric Boat and down at Newport News. We have not historically been involved with EB, and EB is in an envious position that they don't have to compete for their contracts. They're all sole source to them, so they don't go through competitive processes. Their big challenge is they have a CapEx, a facility improvement of about $1.8 billion. Yes, $1.8 billion in facility improvements in order to ramp up for the construction of the Columbia class. And associated with that, they have to grow their workforce by over 30%. And that's one of the big challenges, is where are all those workers going to come from? And then the associated growth that is going to be needed in the supplier base for all of the equipment that they procure for those submarines is going to be a challenge for them. And then the third of the General Dynamics shipyards is actually on the West Coast, down in San Diego. And NASSCO is focused on the building of auxiliaries, and she also builds commercial ships. So she builds some of those Jones Act ships, where they're the roll-on, roll-off ships for tote or container ships for Matson, and she also does ship repair as well as the construction side of it. Interesting enough, the company was founded in 1905 as a small machine shop, and then as the war came on, they moved to the waterfront where they're located now and decided to get into the shipbuilding business. They were acquired by General Dynamics in 1998, and after they joined General Dynamics, NASSCO acquired 3 additional yards, 2 of them in Norfolk and then 1 down in Maypoint, Florida, in the Navy home ports to do ship repair. So they are a major player in the ship repair world as we speak. NASSCO has 1 graving dock and 1 floating dock. They're 80 acres. They do not own the land. It's actually the port facility in San Diego that owns the land, and the land that the other repair shipyards are on. NASSCO is currently building TAOs. Those are replenishment ships, primarily oilers, excuse me, for the Navy. They also have the expeditionary support bases, which were done on congressional ads. We have worked with them in the past on some of the Navy programs. We're looking to work with them in the future, but a little bit of a challenge for us is our client, Philly Shipyards, in direct competition with them, and could create a conflict of interest where we may not be able to support NASSCO. Their challenges over the next decade is right now we're in a lull in the Jones Act trade. So where they usually have this mix of commercial and military work, right now they're totally reliant on the Navy for the work that's in the shipyard. Now we'll switch over to the other big shipbuilding organization in the country, Huntington Ingalls. The first of those is Newport News in the Norfolk area. They're on the James River just before you get into the Chesapeake Forum. So really at the bay, at the start of the bay. Newport News is just got gigantic, 25,000 employees, over 550 acres, 7 graving docks, 1 floater. You can see the pictures here with the carriers. They are the nation's sole builder of nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. They also are partner with EB and build nuclear submarines there as well. But you can see over the history, she was founded as the Chesapeake Dry Dock and Construction Company in the late 1800s. She's built more than 800 ships. Probably the most famous of the commercial ships she built was the SS United States passenger liner. She was spun off in 2011 from Northrop Grumman, and that's when Huntington Ingalls Industry was formed with her, and also with the next shipyard we're going to talk about down in Pascagoula, Mississippi. She's building the Ford class carriers. She's also building some of the Virginia class submarines as a subcontractor to EB, as well as the Columbia class. And we've had various engagements with Newport News, mostly in areas where she's had to compete, like unmanned undersea vehicles. Like EB, though, she does not have to compete for the carriers and for the submarines. Those are sole source. So again, they don't have to put in competitive proposals for those. One of the challenges is that the nation is behind in the overhaul of the submarines, and also the carrier refuelings. And Newport News has gotten back into the repair world as well as the new construction. And it's been a little bit of a challenge for her to step up on the repair side, and she struggled just like our public shipyards have. She has to grow her workforce in order to support the Columbia class, in addition to the aircraft carriers that she's building. And just like EB, she's going to have to grow the support base with this growth and workload that she's going to see. Okay, then moving down onto the Gulf Coast, her sister shipyard in Pascagoula, Mississippi, we get into Ingalls, which is the other division, and she builds a wide variety of ships, from Navy warships to Coast Guard cutters. She was founded in 1938 by Robert Ingalls as a commercial shipbuilder. She got into the Navy ship construction in 1957, building nuclear-powered submarines, believe it or not. Now, she no longer builds submarine. They got out of that business. They found it rather difficult, and actually decided in the 60s to then go after destroyer and large deck amphibious assault ships, which today those are 2 of her prime things that she builds. Lytton was then acquired by Northrop Grumman in 2001 when Northrop Grumman decided to get into the shipbuilding business. So that lasted about 10 years. They had enough and decided it was time to get out. The employment down there is 11,500, so also another big one, the largest employer in the state of Mississippi. She sits on 800 acres. She has a large dry dock. You can see it down in the corner on the picture there. The sidewall actually comes off and she transfers the ships onto the dry dock to launch them. And then the dry dock goes out into the bay, dry dock goes down and she launches her ships. Like I said, there's a wide variety. She is the other builder of the DDG-51s. She's a sole builder of the LPD-17 and the LHA-6 class of amphibious ships. She is building the national security cutter for the Coast Guard, and she's involved in the DDG-X design. We've been involved with them on various different engagements. The challenge for Huntington Ingalls right now is the potential that the Navy will stop building large amphibious ships. We'll see how that plays out here with Congress. I think they have a different opinion of whether we're going to continue to build those large amphibious ships or smaller ones. And then the last of the national security cutters are under construction, and she is a player and a competitor for the offshore patrol cutter that the Coast Guard is currently competing. Okay, now we'll move on to the other two yards that aren't owned by Huntington or by General Dynamics. The first of those is Austal, and these originally were the two LCS builders. Austal is a subsidiary of the Australian parent company who builds fast ferries. Interesting enough, the US component is much larger than the parent and dominates the financials for that company. But she has to operate under a special security agreement because again, she's doing work for the US government. Up until recently, she specialized in the construction of aluminum ships, and both the ships that you see in the pictures here are aluminum. The company was actually formed relatively short time ago, 1999, as a joint venture with Bender Shipbuilding for the construction of fast ferries, and she built two fast ferries for the Hawaiian trade. In 2006, Austal bought out her partner so that she could then be a prime contractor for the LCS program. The first two LCSs, interesting enough, were built under General Dynamics, where Bath Iron Works was the prime for those. But when the block buy came up, in order to be more competitive, she went off on her own and competed for those. But she had to get out from under a joint venture because the US Navy does not allow joint ventures on shipbuilding. And then through a mix recently over the last year of government and corporate funding, over $100 million she's put into her facilities, and she's starting up steel fabrication. So she's got to build out the Independence class of the LCS, that's the trimaran version, and then these EPF vessels, the most recent of those are going to be converted into hospital ships and be regional hospital ships. The TATSs are tugs or salvage ships. Those are steel, and those are the first of the steel ships that she's going to be building, and she would sole source those. And we've done quite a bit of work for Austal and continue to do that. We've done CAPTWs and currently have an ICE proposal in with her. So her challenges are to start up a steel construction, and she's got to go win some future work. And she's been competing for the OPC program. She's also been competing for the Tiagos Ocean Surveillance. So she's got a lot of irons in the fire now, hoping to secure some additional work for the future. And then last but least is Fincantieri Marinette Marine. I was the president, CEO, and general manager there from 2012 through 2015. She was a dirt yard then. Nothing looked like she does now. We put over $100 million into facilities to be able to build for the LCS program. The yard actually goes back to 1942. There was some great patriots. They literally went to Washington, DC to secure a shipbuilding contract. And they were able to get a contract to build tugs and barges for the Navy, wooden tugs and barges. In 2008, the shipyard was purchased by Fincantieri, who wanted to enter into the US business. The LCS and the Saudi multi-mission ships are done under Lockheed Martin as a subcontractor. Fincantieri, being one of the largest shipbuilders in the world, did not like being a subcontractor to Lockheed Martin and went off and pursued the FFG, the frigate competition as a prime contractor. And I was the capture executive for that. And AJ and team supported me in that win, both starting with early strategy work on prospective lessons learned and then working all the way through the proposal phase. The shipyard employs about 1,500. In order to ramp up for the frigate, she's going to have to add about another 500 people. She sits on 52 acres on the Menominee River, which is the river that forms the boundary between Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and Wisconsin. The ship lift here is actually Photoshopped. She's in construction now, but that's how she likes. So it's a little bit different how she launches from others of the bigs. She is sitting on the ship launch there, ship lift, and what it literally is an elevator. And those boxes you see alongside the ship are actually where the cables are. And so that she lowers that platform then down into the water for launch, and it makes for a much easier transition. The LCSs, if you've seen some of those pictures, are the side launch where she splashes fairly heavily into it. SMA has done a lot of work in the management consulting and proposal areas, as we talked about, and we hope to continue to support her in the future. Her challenges are finishing up the LCS and Saudi programs and then start up a construction on 62. Right now, that shipyard doesn't need any more work. She needs to figure out how she's going to execute the work she has. So that completes our tour of the new construction yards, and I'll turn it back over to you, AJ.
Wow, thank you so much, Chuck. That's very fascinating. We have a couple questions. I know that we're running over, so I'll limit the questions because I think we're going to have you back also next week. So,
right.
Graving dock versus floating dock, what's the difference?
Yes, so a graving dock, what usually happens is they're built down. So think of it's like a swimming pool essentially, and it's a swimming pool that has a gate that can go open. The dry dock or loading dock itself has flotation, and it's actually a vessel, and through ballasting can move up and down. So cool. two different ways to take ships out of the water.
Cool. There's, I think, a number of questions here. Maybe perhaps next week you can actually show us some short video clips of how ships get launched different ways.
Absolutely.
That'd be fascinating to watch. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Now, this is just part one of Chuck's presentation. And next week, Chuck's actually going to talk about the ship repair yard. So maybe we'll show some video clips of ships being launched.